Increasing the minimum wage is never going to solve the problems that people think it will. Let's talk about minimum wage. I think there's a lot of confusion or frustration with the minimum wage discussion. I think people want an increased minimum wage, and it makes sense on paper to increase minimum wage, right? You increase the hourly rate, you improve that, you improve people's lives. Seems logical. Yet, I think we constantly see that that is not what happens. Places where you've improved the minimum wage, what do all of those places have in common? They want to increase the minimum again. I think a lot of times you see people who get minimum wage increases and they're not happy. And ultimately, it doesn't ever seem to really have the impact that people are expecting it to have. And I think ultimately, I'm not going to call into question the motives behind wanting a higher minimum wage. I think it makes perfect sense. People are wanting their pay, what they earn, to catch up to their expenses, right? Rent is up, groceries are up. Life in general is just more expensive now than it used to be. And people don't want to have to work 2 or 3 jobs to survive. So today I want to talk about why it doesn't work, right? And I think we all know the simple answer, but I think there are deeper reasons behind that answer. And I want to start by just clarifying. I am not stating my thoughts on whether I think a minimum wage is a good idea or not, right? Increasing it. I think ultimately the idea, the concept behind increasing minimum wage makes perfect sense. I think it's logical. I think it makes perfect sense. I think, though, that increasing the minimum wage is never going to solve the problems that people think it will. The first question we have to ask is, why doesn't it work? Right? Why does this increase in minimum wage, why doesn't it work? And I think we all know the simple answer. And so let's all say it on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Profits. Yes, it's company profits. That is why minimum wage increases never work, because it costs the companies way too much money to increase the minimums. And you may think, well, that doesn't matter if it's mandated. That's true, but companies simply adjust, right? That's what they do. Just because they increase the pay rate doesn't actually mean that you're going to bring home any more money than you had before. So I think first it's probably important to talk about the cost. I think a lot of people look at minimum wage increases and the thought is you're just bringing up the bottom. Right? It shouldn't be that big of a deal. These companies make a lot of money. And that's true for big corporations, but that's not always true for every branch of a big corporation, right? So if you think of fast food, you can probably look around your town and see 100 fast food restaurants that are closed. Well, is the whole chain closed? Of course it isn't, but your branch is. Why is that? Your branch probably wasn't profitable. If a minimum wage increases for a whole company, it could impact different locations differently. But additionally, it's almost never just bringing the bottom up, right? Because that would result in a huge amount of turnover. So if you're making, let's say, $15 an hour, and the minimum wage in your area is $10 an hour, then all of a sudden the mandate comes through, and now minimum wage in your area is $15 an hour. If your company then raises new hires up to $15 an hour, are you going to be okay earning the same amount as someone who started yesterday? Probably not, which means they're going to have to do a compression analysis, which means they're going to have to look at all the other people who make more than 15 and see if new people coming in are going to compress up against those other rates. And so then they're going to have to go to you and say, okay, they make 15, they've been here for 3 years, we're going to have to give them an increase. Let's move them to 17. But then there's someone making 17. they're going to want something. So they got to go to 20. And that's just going to keep on going up until you hit a point in the pay structure where there's a big enough gap that you can increase people's pay without impacting that next job up. So the costs stack up really quickly. And in a company, for the most part, your cost of labor, your wages, are one of the biggest expenses that you have. So increasing the minimum wage is going to eat into a lot of your profit. And that is what companies do not want. So what do they do to adjust? Why is it that it doesn't work? The first thing that they do, a lot of companies, particularly retail, probably retail more than most, but if you're part-time, you work 30 hours a week, $10 an hour, then all of a sudden you've got to get paid $15 an hour. What most companies will do, they'll cut your hours, right? So now, instead of working 30 hours a week, you work 15 or 20 hours. So in theory, you're making more per hour, but you're not actually making any more money. Some companies don't want to cut hours. So what do? They will cut jobs. They'll cut roles. They'll cut responsibilities. So maybe you have 10 people making $10 an hour. Pay has to increase to 15. They don't want to cut your hours. That doesn't seem right. So what do? They cut staff. So now, instead of having 10 people making $10 an hour, you have 5 people making $15 an hour, or 7 people making $15 an hour. So you're getting paid more, you're keeping your same hours, but now you're having to do double the work because you're having to make up for the 3 to 5 people that they got rid of to be able to accommodate the cost of your increase. Sometimes they will eliminate jobs entirely, right? So maybe you're not retail. They can't just cut hours. They can't do those things. Maybe they eliminate your job. Maybe your job is close enough to some other job and they can just roll all the responsibilities into one job. And then they don't need you anymore. So yeah, they'll pay entry-level people $15 an hour, but they're gonna get rid of half the jobs and just shift those responsibilities over to somebody else. Another thing that they do is they automate jobs. So, especially now with the rise of AI, who knows what kind of jobs they'll be able to automate. But even if you look pre-AI, if, for instance, a company comes out with, we're going to pay all of our cashiers nationwide $15 an hour. Everybody cheers. Wow, yay, $15 an hour. How incredible. But then go to a store. Go to a retail store right now. Right? Let's say Walmart. If you go to Walmart right now, are you going to stand in line behind 32 other people to go to the one checkout aisle that has a human being working on it? Or are you going to go to the self-checkout and do the cashier's job yourself for free? It's a publicity stunt. Walmart gets to say, hey, we give all of our cashiers $14 an hour, but we only have one per store. The rest of it is you're going to check yourself out and you're going to do it for free. We're not going to give you a discount on the groceries. None of that. We're just going to have you do it. So you work for Walmart now, and then we get to tell everybody we're paying our cashiers more. So the unfortunate reality is that a lot of times no one thinks about the mom and pop stores, right? No one thinks about your locally owned business that's run by a family that's doing the best that they can, who can't afford to pay those numbers, right? They're not making millions of dollars in profit. They're not making trillions, right? They are scraping by. And now when their wage bill increases significantly, a lot of them only have 2 options. Either they raise prices to the point that they start losing customers, or they have to shut down. Both of which pretty much is them shutting down. If you're in a big company, what will often happen is that they will close a branch. Whether that's like fast food companies that have decided to leave California, right? So California, you got to pay $20 an hour for fast food. Some of those fast food restaurants have said, you know what? Okay, great. We're leaving. We'll go back to Arizona or Utah or wherever. Others will simply close your branch, right? So if you can drive around town, look at some of the branches that were closed, they probably weren't profitable. Now imagine they've got to increase their wage bill. they probably really wouldn't be profitable. So a lot of times they might just close those stores down. And then one thing I almost forgot, and this one's tricky because you won't realize it right away. They will eliminate your merit or your bonus, right? They might cut back on the bonus, or they might not give you a merit next year, right? They'll say, oh, economic reasons, no merit. But really, when they don't give you a merit, every year they don't give you a merit, your rate is catching up to what it would have been had they waited longer to give you that increase. So it's offsetting those costs just over a longer period of time. And then the last thing that impacts all of us is the increased prices, right? I mean, if you can't make a hamburger for $8 anymore because you got to pay everybody that cooks them a lot of money, they're going to start charging $10, $12, $15 a hamburger. And then there's nothing we can do about it because everyone's got to pay it. All that being said, I think that is a part of, and I want to say this and people are going to hate it, but I'll try to explain my thoughts. This idea of a living wage is a myth. It doesn't exist. Any wage that you pay somebody that would be livable will therefore not be livable because companies will adjust to overcompensate for the extra expense. Whether that's increase in prices, cutting hours, cutting jobs, you will lose your job. You will lose your hours, or you will have to pay more for the same items, thereby offsetting it. That's why you have these places that said, look, we need a livable wage. We need $15 an hour. A year later, we need 17. A year later, what about 20? The reason is because all these companies are just offsetting. They're just offsetting the cost over and over and over. So it doesn't really work out in this super simple picture of what does it take to live? Okay, let's pay everybody that. Because these companies are not going to eat into their profits. My general thoughts are a living wage would be great. Increasing minimum wages can be great. But unless companies get on board with, we're going to have to take a hit to our profits, and then we just need to adjust over time, minimum wage is not going to solve a lot of our problems, and you're not going to arrive at a livable wage. I think the reality is that if you want to not have to deal with this situation, you just have to advance. And that, I know that isn't helpful, but honestly, these companies don't think of these minimum wage jobs as jobs that you should be surviving in. And I'm not saying that personally. I'm saying that as someone who has worked behind the scenes for decades. I'm telling you now, if you are complaining because you can't make a living on your cashier salary, it's falling on deaf ears with these companies because they're not anticipating you having to survive on your cashier pay. So it isn't registering with them. You have to advance beyond those entry-level jobs, or you're going to continually battle this problem. I understand that this is an incredibly unhelpful and uninspiring video, but I have spent a decade in compensation, and I have seen this from the other side. And I'm telling you now, increasing minimum wage is just going to be offset the second it happens, and it's not going to have the impact that you might think it will. So I hope you at least found this video informative. If you like this kind of content, then like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.